Good day everyone, my name is Jane Ashley L. DACAIMAT and I'm with LUISA BASCO and Keicy Francisco. So we are here to give you knowledge about the instructional materials and its subtopics. Our subtopics name Basic Instructional Materials, Competence-Based Learning, Instruction Sheet, Information Sheet, Task Sheet, operation sheet, and job sheet. So before we tackle those subtopics, I briefly explain what instructional materials is all about. So when we say instructional materials, it is the trainer used in order to provide knowledge or transfer information to trainees. Also, it gives instruction on the tasks that the trainees need to do that are set by the trainer. For the objectives of our report, we create objectives in every subtopic. For the first subtopic, which is competency-based learning, we have define competency-based learning, identify the different forms of learning materials, explain the factors to be considered when developing the competency-based learning materials, and lastly, list the parts of competency-based learning materials. So for the second subtopic, which about instructional materials, we have discuss the meaning of instruction sheet, define briefly the different types of instruction sheet, and lastly is explain the different guidelines in developing instruction sheet. For the third subtopic, which is information sheet, we have describe the meaning of the information sheet, name and define the different parts of the information sheet, and lastly is explain the format of information sheet code, information sheet title, and the body. So for our fourth subtopic, which is task sheet, we have defined the task sheet and identify and discuss the format of task sheet. For our fifth subtopic, which is operation sheet, we have discussed the meaning of operation sheet, explain why an operation sheet is necessary in the workplace, and lastly is list the steps on developing an operation sheet. So for the last subtopic, which is job sheet, we have define the meaning of job sheet and explain the purpose of job sheet.
Hi everyone, I am Luisa BASCO and I am here to discuss about the basic instructional materials. So basic instructional materials are the tangible substances that provide the audio and or the visual component necessary for learning. It is used by the teacher for them to simplify their teaching, and by that students can improve their skills, abilities, knowledge, and to contribute to their overall development. Competency-based learning materials, or the CBLM. It is simply a well-designed and carefully developed learning materials that give trainees detailed instruction to guide them throughout the learning process. So CBLM refers to the media that contain information related to work requirements. It is also the learning that is guided by the word achieving the competency required in the workplace, the tools that facilitate the individual learning processes, and also as the instruments that measure the competency required in the workplace. We have 7 different forms of learning materials. First is the learning guides. It is labeled as the learning experience in your templates. So the tasks on the learning experience are the learning activities, and this is your guide throughout the module. Second is assessment materials. It is the techniques used to measure students' academic abilities, skills to measure one progress towards academic proficiency in a specific subject area. Next is a workbook with activities and tasks and content. It is a materials made to guide the work of a student by including a set of questions, exercises, different tasks, and etc. Next is background reading materials or documents. It's just simply the more you know about the topic, it's the easier to read a text and also to understand it. Then the handout and other audiovisual materials. Handout materials are the materials that given to inform or provide additional information, while the audiovisual materials as any instructional aids like maps, charts, models, projector, and televisions for us to make it easier and interesting for students to understand it. Then the industry competency standards. It is a performance criteria developed jointly by educators and business representatives. Last is organizational policies, procedures, and legislations. It provides guidelines for decision-making and processes and the way that the work in an organization should be carried out. We have 7 factors to be considered when developing the competency-based learning materials. First is the principles of CBT. It is characterized as individualized and self-paced, and this is made possible through the use of self-paced learning materials. Next is the training regulations. It is the main basis of the CBT, which is the competency standards in the training regulations, promulgated document that serves as the basis for which the competency-based curriculum and instructional materials and competency assessment tools are developed. Number 3 is trainees' characteristics. So, potential barriers to learning may take its as the root from the trainees' characteristics. Language, literacy, numeracy, diversity, disabilities, personal and isolation are the example of the potential barriers. Next is the key characteristics of adult learners. Adult learners desire that learning can be relevant, task-oriented, participatory, or the two-way communication, friendly, varied, and built on the past experiences. 5 is the learning styles. These affect how trainees gather, organize, and think about the information they acquire from learning. And a deeper understanding of the age of the learning style will help you to hide your activities, both in facilitating learning sessions and in developing your learning materials. Number 6 is the 9 events of instructions. The sequence of learning activities in the session plan was guided by the 9 events of instruction. So in developing your CBLM or the competency-based learning materials, it's just likewise be helpful to think of the Robert Gagne's 9 events of instructions. Last is the dimension of competency. It should provide for the acquisition of the 4 dimensions of competency task skills, task management skills, job role and environment management skills, and contingency management skills. We have 2 main parts of competency-based learning materials. First is the preliminary pages and second is instruction sheets. Preliminary pages are very important because the development of a lesson plan begins somewhere. And a good place to start is with a list or description of general information about the plan. So this information sets boundaries or limits of the plan. Preliminary page that consists of 6 important parts. First is the front page. It contains the unimportant or remarkable information. And the components of the front page are the title, features, the sector, the qualification title, the unit of competency, the module title, and also the name of the school. Second is trainees guides on how to use the CBLM. This page gives instruction on how to use CBLM materials on the training period. Next is the list of competencies. So list of competency, it is page that contains the qualification title on top of the page. And there are 4 main parts in the list of competencies like competency number, unit of competency, module title, and also the code. Next is competency summary. It is a summary that identifies if the knowledge that the trainer discussed is effective on the trainers. So this page is where the facilitator comes up with the idea of evaluating his or her students to see if they have learned something or the strategies used is effective. Whether it is a positive or negative, it will reflect to you as a facilitator. Number 5 is the learning outcome summary. This part is summarizing statements that describe the knowledge or the skills. So this page is a description of the specific knowledge, skills, or expertise that the learner will get from the learning activity, such as the training session, seminar, course, or programs. Last is the learning experience. It refers to any interaction, course, program, or other experience in which learning takes place, whether it occurs in traditional academic settings. So for this page naman, it has the learning outcome number and title and a table of all the activities for presentation, practice, and feedback that the trainee can undergo for him to attain the required competence. Next is the instruction sheet. So instruction sheet is a piece of paper containing information that gives out instruction in performing a task. Example of instruction sheet are the information sheet, self-check, task sheet, operation sheet, job sheet, and performance criteria checklist. So for you to understand it better what instruction sheet really is, Ms. DACAIMAT and Ms. Francisco will explain it to you.
Again, my name is Jane Ashley DACAIMAT and I'm going to explain about instruction sheet, information sheet, and some parts of task sheet. So, what is instruction sheet? Instruction sheet from the word itself, instruction, which is composed of a step-by-step guide and procedure that those trainees needed to follow in the specific task or things. It is also a way that will lead them to achieve success at the end of the learning period, because the instruction sheet is composed of information that makes the trainees become knowledgeable. There's a different instruction sheet that will fit on the learning activities, such as information sheet, which is all about the information about the topic or the lesson without having any resources online and non-online. While the task sheet is a set of instructions that the trainees should be able to follow and perform. On the other hand, the operation sheet is composed of a set of instructions on how to operate the specific equipment, machines, devices, and so on. And lastly, the job sheet. When we say job sheet, it is all about the set of instruction that is based on the job of the trainee. For further understanding, we will discuss all of the different instruction sheets one by one. Here are the 9 guidelines when we are developing instruction sheet. So first one is a use language that is straightforward and is easily understood by the trainees. In communication, language is essential in order to avoid misconception and misunderstanding, which is identical when it comes to developing instruction sheets. As a trainer, we need to be aware what type of trainees we have so that we know what language we will be using, and by that we can avoid misunderstanding, and we need to ensure that they understand what we are going to say. The second one is supplement the words with illustrations, pictures, and diagrams for greater clarity, in such a way that those trainees will know how a certain things works, especially those instructions that are difficult to understand, or it must be needed an action, so that by putting some illustrations, pictures, and diagrams, trainees will be better understand what's on the instruction. Third one is give specific direction that are clear and concise. When we are developing an instruction sheet, we need to be straight to the point when it comes to giving directions to the trainees, because overlapping some words leads to misunderstanding, and making it long leads to trainees losing interest. Number 4. Limit each instruction sheet to 1 to 10 sheets of paper if possible, but avoid overcrowding the page. As what I said, if the instruction sheet is too long, trainees will lose their interest in reading and also lose their focus, because there's a possibility that they might be bored. So when we are going to create an instruction sheet in any form, we must consider the pages of the paper and use the right format in which the word must be readable. Fifth one is separate the various items, points, or paragraphs by spacing, by numbers, letters, or bullet. In that way, the trainees can't build any confusion in their minds, because any items, points, or paragraphs have different meanings. Also, it is not good and it looks too long if we didn't do it by number or in a bullet, and even if they are not in a proper spacing. Next one is develop a uniform format for all instruction sheet. Uniform format of the instruction sheet will help the trainees to easily gather or find the information that they are looking for. And it seems attractive if it is organized, like having a proper format of spacing, size, and also the text. Uniform format gave enticement to the trainees. Number 7. Using underlining to emphasize or to distinguish between headings, subheadings, and content. In different types of instruction sheets, we need to highlight or emphasize on the headings, subheadings, and the content itself in such a way that the trainees will not be confused about which those are the title, the objectives, the content, and so on. And in order to do that, we can use bold or underlining the words. Next one is be consistent in the use of terminology to avoid confusion. We must stay on the words or terminologies that we use so that trainees will better understand what we are saying on the instruction sheet. We avoid using some uncommon or unfamiliar words, especially those words that are not related to the type of instruction sheet we are making. Lastly is include only relevant information. We use information that is connected and applicable to the type of instruction sheet that we use because there is a possibility that the trainees misunderstand the information we put. Especially in the information sheet, we focus on the information of the topic without putting some unrelated and irrelevant information. Let's proceed to the information sheet. Information sheets are composed of your own words, which means it is free from any copyright law and plagiarism. As what it says, it is developed because there is no available information in different resources, online and non-online. Basically, trainers are the primary resources of the information that they put in making an information sheet because the information, tasks, and so on comes from them without having any basis on any resources. But if we are going to use some resources, we need to do some proper citation and acknowledgement to the author of the certain information that we copied. In addition, we can also put some pictures, diagrams, and illustration when we are going to make information sheet. So, these trainees will understand the content of the topic or the lesson. Parts of information sheet. So, information sheet has 5 parts. So, the first one is the learning objectives. Learning objectives is something that the trainees should be able to attain at the end of the lesson or the learning period. It can be a skill or knowledge. When we are creating a learning objectives, it must be measurable, specific, and short, which doesn't require to be long. In our topic outline guidelines that our Professor Jervis made, it says that learning objective has 2 parts, which are action verb and content area. As we all know that action verb describes the action, so that in learning objectives, action verb used in order to determine the desired student performance, followed by giving the content target. For example, define the meaning of curriculum. Identify the different parts of the information sheet. As you notice, the action verb comes first before the content area. If we are making learning objectives, it must be SMART. Stands for specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. The second one is the introduction or the overview. It is the first paragraph of our information sheet, whereas it provides information about the lesson or topic and also what the trainees will learn and expect during the whole learning period. On this part of the information sheet, trainees will gain their interest. The information that the introduction or overview contains about how the topic contributes to the attainment of the main skill to be mastered and also the connection of the previous topic into the current topic and to the following topic. Number 3 is the body or the text. This part of the information sheet is all about giving information and facts to the trainees about the topic. It includes the definition and different important concepts that are needed to discuss on the certain topic. Number 4 is self-checks. Self-checks is the assessment after the lesson discussed. we notice that after the lesson discussed by our teacher or professor, there's always a quiz or recitation, which is important because in that way, the trainer can assess the trainees or the students if they learn on the certain topic or lesson that are discussed, and also to verify if the learning objectives have been achieved. Self-checks mostly are in the form of a quiz. When we are creating self-checks, there is no specific numbers of items, and it depends on the content of the information as long as it covers the whole lesson. Lastly is the answer key. Answer key is a part of the information sheet that contains the right answer on the assessment or the self-check that the trainer made so that the trainees can check or look at the items that they got wrong. If there's an answer key available, we think that the trainees can cheat so that they will get perfect score on the self-check. But it depends on the trainees if they fool themselves, because the purpose of the answer key is to give a deeper explanation to the trainees on their mistakes and to show the best answer. Format of information sheet. So here's the format of information sheet and information sheet code. So I am going to explain first about the information sheet code. As you can see in the picture, it says that information sheet 1.3-3. Information sheet code composed of 3 parts, which are the core competency number, the LO number, so LO stands for learning outcome, and lastly is the content number. So I use the code of my own report, that's why information sheet 1.3-3. So the number 1 represent the core competency number because our report, which about the instructional material, is under Chapter 1, the planning training session. So the core competency number is 1. Next one is the LO number. So the LO stands for the learning outcome. So the Chapter 1 is composed of 5 learning outcomes. And our topic is under the learning outcome 3. That's why it is 3. Lastly is the content number. So the content number of my report, which about the instruction sheets and information sheet, is categorized as a third in our subtopic. That's why it is 3. So the information sheet code of my report is information sheet 1.3-3. Let's proceed for the format of the information sheet. For the title, we can use Bookman Old Style as our font. The font size is 14, the alignment is center, the case is title case, and the line space is single. And for the body of our information sheet, we can use the font Bookman Old Style. Font size is 12, the alignment is justified, the case is sentence case, the line space is single, and the space between paragraph is 6 point after.
Good day everyone, I'm Keicy and Francisco and I'm assigned to report about task sheet and its format, which is task sheet number, title, performance objectives, and its 3 elements such as condition, performance, and criterion. So what is task sheet? Task sheet is a set of instructions telling the trainee to perform a single task. So task sheet composed of a list of tasks that is needed to perform by the trainee. Trainers provides a task sheet to track the important duties that the trainees must carry out in order to complete a single task. And with the help of task sheet, trainees will learn how to manage their time and to be organized because they can track on their task sheet what is completed and their uncompleted tasks. So for example, your job is housekeeping room attendant who acts as a housekeeper for hotel rooms. And in order to clean the room successfully, they must perform a single task that is also indicated on their task sheet, such as cleaning inside the room, dust and polish guest rooms, change bed sheets, remove and replace used towels and toiletries, and bathroom cleaning, and etc. So for this slide, I'm going to discuss the format of task sheet. So first is we have the task sheet number. It is a code that is located on the upper part of the document. Each task sheet that is given by the trainee has this number and being recorded to the system in able to track the specific task. This task sheet number is also sequential and it cannot be changed. Number 2 is title. It refers to the specific task that is needed to be done by the trainee. The title of task sheet must be described in a few words, starting with the verb that is directly describe the task to be mastered. And number 3 is performance objectives. In the task sheet, it identifies what would be the specific results, such as what are the knowledge, skills, and attitude that the trainee will gain after doing or performing the specific task. So the performance objective has 3 elements. These are conditions, performance, and criterion. So the first element is condition. It describes the circumstances or situation in performance objectives in order for the trainee to perform a specific task. It's like giving or telling the trainee on what actions they should do, but it's in written form. And in addition, the condition clause of the performance objectives typically starts with the word given. So for example, given a hammer, you should able to do that. Given a user's manual, you should able to do that. So that's the example of condition. So next is performance. It describes what the students are able to do and what the students will do when demonstrating mastery of the objectives. And if you're going to create a performance objectives, you should use verbs or action verbs to describe the performance objectives. So for example, students will able to describe, students will able to demonstrate, students will able to list. That is the example of performance. So the next element is criterion. It describes the level of speed or accuracy of performing the specific task. So it typically refers to time, measurements, quality standards, and etc. So for example, within 30 minutes period, next is in less than 15 minutes. That is the example of criterion.
Number 4, supplies, materials, and equipment. In this part, it listed all the supplies, materials, and equipment that the trainees needed in order to perform a specific task. For example, the trainees are tasked to do a room service. So, in the supplies, they are need trays, trolleys, cutlery, linen, glassware, crockery, and also the food. On the other hand, on the equipment, they need are telephone, computer, and other devices they use in collecting the orders from the customer. Number 5 is the steps and procedure. It contains a step-by-step procedure that the trainees needed to follow in order to perform a task successfully. When we are creating a step or procedure, it must be understandable when it comes to using a word or language. And we need to ensure that it will be easy to follow so that we can avoid some misunderstanding and misconceptions that will lead to some circumstances, such as doing the wrong things, skipping the steps, and so on. In addition, we will be able to use some illustrations, pictures, diagrams for the best clarity of the procedures and steps to the trainees. As you guys remember our module to our previous professor, Miss Navales, when we are in the first year college, where we xerox the module about how to operate the oven, and on the steps, there's a picture beside that illustrate what the text implies. So, we students will understand the whole step or the procedure on how to operate the oven. Next is assessment method. It is all about evaluating and assessing the trainees' performance in their assigned tasks. There's a lot of method when we are assessing trainees' tasks, such as video presentation, portfolio, and so on. But the common one is by demonstration. whereas the trainees will demonstrate the task in front of the trainer and the other panelists, and they will going to observe the trainee based on the knowledge and skills they have while performing the task. Lastly is the performance criteria checklist. It will be the trainer or panelist basis on judging the performance of the trainees. They have the power and right to evaluate. The criteria are composed of different things that the trainees must be required to do in performing the task. In creating a criteria checklist, it will depend on the preferences of the trainer on what they needs to consider on the performance of the trainees. As a student, when we are performing a task, there's always a criterion that the teacher gives us so that we know what their basis in grading or in evaluating us. Sometimes there's a peer evaluation and self-evaluation. This performance criteria checklist helps the trainer to give a score and assess the trainee if they learn during the learning period.
So again, I'm Keicy and Francisco, and now I'm going to discuss about operation sheet and guidelines in developing operation sheet. So first is an operation sheet. It's a set of procedures on the use and maintenance of an equipment or a machine. So, meaning that the operation sheet is a type of document that is composed of instructions and sets of procedures on how to use such things like how to operate and fix machinery, tools, and equipments. Next is the procedures of an operation sheet will depends on the manufacturer's manual since the operation may vary from brand to brand. So, in making the operation sheet, it depends on the owner of the business because the machines or the tools and equipments that they are using in able to build their own product are not the same. Next is the performance objectives of an operation sheet should then include the manufacturer's manual as the basis of the criterion or standard. So, aside from the manual of the business, it is also necessary to include the operation sheets as a guide for their workers or trainees. Because as a manufacturer or any kind of businesses, they should also develop a document which is the operation sheet or manual for their technical informations about the production process because it will serve for their employees as their basis for they will follow the standard or the correct operation. Next is, this is used for teaching a single basic task, operation, or process. So with the help of an operation sheet, trainees will be able to learn on how to perform a basic operation of machines, tools, and equipments. So for the example of operation sheet, our trainer would be our major subject in food service management, which is Mrs. Annalyn Navales. She will give us a task to bake a cake for our laboratory. So, there are machines and tools and equipments needed for us to finish our product successfully. And these are ovens, pastry tools, and etc. So, the trainer will give her students an operation sheet as their basis and guide on how they will operate and use the machines and tools. Because the operation sheet contain demonstration and procedures with the moving pictures of the action to be followed. So let's now proceed for the guidelines in developing operation sheet. So let's start with the unit of instruction. It analyzes each unit of instruction and make a list of jobs that are required to offer the trainee with the experiences that will allow them to meet the units of performance objectives. Next is educational objectives. Perform each work and keep a record of the operations, procedures, step, and important points that best define the sequence of events required to complete each job. Make a list of a tool and materials you'll need as well as any relevant references. Next is jobs. Create a raw draft of the operation sheet using the template provided. Be as concise as possible while still providing enough information for a beginner to understand. Next is operations. Analyze the operations for their completeness of steps of procedures. Next is steps of procedures. Use illustrations, drawings freely if they will contribute to a clear understanding or more installed recall of the trainer's demonstrations. Next is key point. Evaluate the work using the first draft of the operation sheet and check the sequence and completeness of the operations and steps of procedures inside each operations. And lastly, illustrations. Finalize the revised operation sheet for duplication in quantities for students' use. So let's now proceed to job sheet. So for the first bullet, it means that job sheet contains information in performing a specific task. It is a mandatory manual given to the trainee for them to perform and to enhance their skills and knowledge. It can't be rewrite or changed because it is the standard instructions to a specific task assigned to the trainee. So for the second bullet, it means that the trainers are expected first to teach their trainees on how to operate machines, tools, and equipments that is indicated on the operation sheets. After that, the trainers will give the job sheet to his trainee for him to perform. So for the last bullet, it says that providing job sheet will help your trainees enhance, retain, and practice their knowledge, skills, and attitudes. That's why using or providing job sheets for trainees is also necessary because it will help them to learn and enhance their knowledge and skills on how to perform several jobs or tasks. So for this slide is all about the conclusion and the summary of our topic. First is competency-based learning is a simply well-designed and carefully developed learning materials that give trainees detailed instructions to guide them through the learning process. Next is instruction sheet, from the word itself instruction, which is composed of step-by-step guide and procedures those trainees needed to follow in a specific task or things. Next is instruction sheet has 4 types including information sheet, task sheet, operation sheet, and job sheet. And information sheet is not a copy or duplicate of an article, newspaper, or book. It is developed when there's no resources available to explain the required information. And a job sheet integrates tasks and operations, example, housekeeping, that is your job. While the operation sheet is a set of procedure on the use and maintenance of an equipment or a machine. For example, the machines or tools and equipments that you need in your job, such as cleaning equipments, vacuum, and etc. On the other hand, a task sheet is composed of list of tasks that you need to perform to accomplish your job, such as task sheet in doing bathroom cleaning, dusting, floor cleaning, and etc.